Representational state transfer, or REST, via the Wikipedia page again, is a pattern for defining and addressing resources on networks. It provides a clear, consistent URL for you to use within your application. As you'll see, Laravel ties the concept of RESTful routing to our controller's CRUD ideals by using resource controllers. So our next idea is that we're going to take what we've learned about REST and see what our routes are going to look like. We're going to end up using a controller here to lay out some actions. And the idea behind the controller, like we've talked about in MVC, is we're trying to separate concerns. We're trying to keep our content separate from our presentation and the data processing or the model from our content. We're trying to make sure that everything is contained so that we're not laying out messy code, we get better security, easier to test, so on and so forth. But we need to know, what are our routes going to look like for our to-do list? So I'm going to spell out a couple of these here just in a comment and just to see what it's going to look like for us for the to-do list application for ODOT. So here we're going to just have a basic one that is going to be the root URL or the home. Then we're going to have another one that's going to be /todos. We're going to have another that's going to be /todos and then show. That's going to show us our actual to-do list. This is going to show us all lists. Okay, and then we're going to have another one where we're going to edit something, where we want to modify an existing list. So we'll say to-dos /1 and then restfully say /edit. Okay, and that will allow us to edit and update. Okay, so this is just kind of an idea of what our routes are going to look like. To create a new one, we're going to have a URL that is /todos /create. All right, and that's going to give us our RESTful routing. We're going to need to do this through controllers, and we'll have to tie those controllers to our routes. But first off, we actually need to create our controller. Even before we create our controller, let's take a look at the routes that we currently have. We see that we have 3. What's another way that we can get in and look at the routes besides just looking at our routes file? We need to switch back over to our terminal. So here inside of our terminal, we want to shell in or get to our Vagrant box. So we'll do Vagrant SSH. All right, great. Now we're inside of our Vagrant box, and we are currently in the home folder. So we're going to go to Sites, and then our project, which is Laravel Basics. All right, here's our information. Again, we're going to use Artisan, which we've talked about a little bit, and we're going to go and look at our routes using an Artisan routes command. So PHP Artisan routes. Okay, so here, let me make this a little bit larger. Here you can see all of our routes. We have a get for root, and it's going to be an action to a closure, no before and after filters, which we'll get into, and it's not a named route, which we will name a route later. We have a to-dos, which is going to be a closure as well, and then a to-dos that accepts the ID. That's pretty good. If we go back over and look at our code, that matches what we have here, and then we're going to need to create all of these routes. But let's go ahead and create our controller, and we're going to do that inside of our Vagrant instance using Artisan as well. Okay, so if you type in the command php artisan and then help, you're going to get a list of all of these commands, but to use help, we would simply say help and then whatever the command name is. If we look at all of our commands by just typing php artisan, okay, we're going to see that there is one for controller called controller make. Okay, let's run help on that. Okay, so here you have a list of arguments. On the controller class, we're going to give it a name. Plenty of options here, but really the only thing that's required is make and then the name. So for us, we're going to create a controller, and we're going to call it to-do list controller. clear our screen, and then do the same command. We're going to remove our help, and then call it to-do list controller. Go ahead and hit enter. All right, it says controller was created successfully. Let's head back over to our code. Look under our controllers folder, and we'll see a base controller, which is the main controller that we have in our application. We're not going to modify this. We have the home controller, which we don't need anymore, so we're going to delete that. And now our to-do list controller. So this is the one that was just generated. So let's look at the actions or what's happening here. So object-oriented code, we have a class, the class name, which is to-do list controller, which is what we spelled out in our generator, and it is extending the base controller from Laravel, which is extending this base controller. Now, everything else in here are all public methods. Each of these methods has a way for us to interact with the views or the front end of the code to display stuff for the users. Let's look at these actions. The first one we have is index. So this is going to display a list of our resources, it says in the comments, and its return is meant to be a response. Exactly what we need. It's going to list out all of our to-do lists. That's our index method or our index action. So the index method makes perfect sense. Next one is our create. We want to create a new to-do list. Well, this is going to be the view that generates a response showing a form for the new resource. So it's not actually creating it or storing it. That is this method, method store. So the method store is going to take what comes back from create, receive it into here, and then generate something new for us and store it. In our case, it'll be into a database eventually. Show, and notice an argument is ID, which we've already made a call to before using a closure, and this is going to return the specified resource, in this case, a to-do list by ID. Edit is going to generate a form for editing that resource. The same thing goes for update. It's the response as save is for the create. This is for edit. So we're going to take an ID in, take the information from the form, and then make our modifications and update the database. Destroy does exactly as you would expect. It is going to remove the resource completely from our storage medium, which would be database.